Well, hello everybody, this is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to your Critique of the Week. It's Friday, May 16th. So glad you could join me. Let's see, who do we have in the house today? A great crowd on hand. We've got 43 people watching, only 21 likes yet, as Dick Westheimer points out. So if you haven't yet clicked the like button, that really helps. Let's see, who do we have here, though? We have Lynn Schilling is here. Good afternoon to you. Dr. Q. Kimberly Gibson-Tran, Jamie Thomas, Danette Bermia, Monica Dobos is here. Hey, Monica, been a bit. Tara Meslick-McMahon is here. Jamie Thomas, Patty Arbor, David Boos. We got Dee Coleman, Katie Dozier over in the back room cleaning out the closet. We've got Sean Evaningo Sanders, Jamie Thomas, I already said, Holly York, Dick Westheimer, who I mentioned too. Let's see. Anybody else? Shape of Soup is here. Mary Keating, Ali Rowland, Rose Lennard, Hammett Malik, Sandra Fees is here. Brian O'Sullivan, hey Brian. Mary Lisa D. Diminishes is here. Sharon Ferrante, Cliff Miller. Yeah, we got a great crew, everybody. Thanks so much for joining me. As always, the point of the critique is to give that wonderful workshop experience that's so valuable. I'm going to turn my volume up a little bit. Hang on. Yeah, how did that happen? That's better. And so what we want to do is give as much feedback as we can as we go through these poems. If you'd like to submit poems for the Critique of the Week, all you have to do is go to rattle.com/page/critique or go to just the website and find it on the menu bar under content and then submit up to 2 poems. And it's helpful if you submit 2 that we can take a look at them. And we'll give as much positive feedback as we can, as much helpful advice. Let us know, let you know what's working, what doesn't, because it's really difficult to figure out what other, the ways that poems land on other people, what makes sense and what doesn't, because we have so much context swirling around. We understand what's going on in our poems. It's difficult for us to have a real sense of what a stranger might think and where we might feel lost and what we might need help with. And, and we'll talk about other things, line breaks, sound, words, diction, voice, all that kind of stuff. Anything that can be helpful, we'll try to pass along as we go through these poems. Now, as always, we like to go through, let's see, do we have anybody here? Trying to find somebody who is a regular on here who we can go over their poems first. I thought I saw someone. Let's see. I'm scrolling down the list. Scrolling down. So there are 175 poems in the queue, or submissions in the queue right now, dating back to about December 10th. Let's see. Yeah, this is compelling. Okay. Where are you? I thought I saw somebody, but I forgot who. Let's go with Ryan McCarty. Now, Ryan's been in Poets Respond a couple times, and a wonderful poet. And let's see, he's got 2 poems here for us. And really, Ryan, this is going to be a high-level poem, I know, because Ryan, he submits to Critique of the Week regularly, and participates here regularly, and there are just always good stuff that he has to share. He says, in the general questions box, these are different for me, and I feel like I really like them, but can't back up far enough to see them clearly, I like love poems that really move outward beyond being about 2 people, and I hope these are starting to do that a bit, and or that someone could help set me on that path a bit more. Okay, so let's take a look at these Lovish poems by Ryan McCarty, and Ryan comes from Ypsilanti, Michigan, and you can find him, appearing on the Rattlecast in that early Poets Response section a few times in the last year. The first time was one of those a poem about the eclipse last year. So it's been about a year even since he first appeared in Rattle. Let's take a look at this poem, Ode to Leg Hair, after Sharon Olds. Here we go. Ode to Leg Hair. It's winter, which is when I watch you all layered and lovely, growing such a thick coat down one leg and running up the other. We take turns pressing our cold soles against each other's warm calves before sleep. I pull my pant leg up like a hitchhiker's invitation, like unwinding a wound to let it breathe, and you can't help touching the edges, testing the shore with gentle fingers, feeling the flesh getting young again. And loving you is knowing summer will shear your fur down to the smooth skin, and all through those hot months you will stick to me, and the rhythm of the ceiling fan won't break up our dance, which has that slower beat. And it's knowing that those months end, that you will catch a shiver before we realize it's time to give up bare-legged sleeping, and your thighs will explode into mine, and I'll be pricked 10,000 times like my skin is waking up after going numb, like I've been laying with you, forgetting your other textures and how the end of one thing is remembering what's coming. So very nice first poem, and as you could tell, there's a real sense of rhythm and music to Ryan's poems, and you have that here. An ode, it's a fitting title, Ode to Leg Hair, after Sharon Olds. I'm not sure exactly what that's referencing with Sharon. Yeah. Who is? Let me check at the. Yeah. So for yeah. I'm going to take a break in just 1 second and say Ollie Rowland. Wait, no. So who is Amy? So Amy and Shape of Soup are saying they have poems here. And I, using handles, I can't tell. That's one problem. Let's see. Yeah. Well, maybe we'll see. Who is Shape of Soup? Anyway, yeah, let me know in the comments and we'll figure that out. Okay. So anyway, yeah, so this poem, as Katie Dozier says here, really nice. My suggestion is just to place it in more active individual moments instead of all summaries of those moments, if that makes sense. Yeah, there's something that feels a little distant about the poem. And that's the thing I was thinking, was that there's, it sort of stays in this mode where it's sort of summarizing rather than remembering a specific time, And I think the poem is has a little distant feeling because of that. Yeah. Okay. So there's it. So Ode to Leg Hair. Let's read it a little more closely. It's winter, which is when I wait, watch you all layered and lovely, growing such a thick coat down one leg and running up the other. And see, so I like the details here and the feeling of that. And but it's staying in this general mode where it's not a specific time, but it's all the times spread out. I remember all these times. And I think that's good to for having a sense of movement in the poem. We want to move in and out of that sense of I'm explaining this sort of how it works every year versus that 1 year. And we can really pinpoint a certain time or a feeling. But I like the beginning of that. We take our turns pressing our cold souls against each other's warm calves before sleep. Again, really great music in this. I pull my pant leg up like a hitchhiker's invitation, like unwinding a wound to let it breathe, and you can't help touching the edges, testing the sore with gentle fingers, feeling the flesh getting young again. Yeah. Yeah, Morgan Phoenix says thick coat down one leg and running up the other confused me, actually. It doesn't sound sensical in terms of describing how hair growth actually happens. And for that, yeah, I think, to me, I was imagining, running the leg up and down, running your hand or the bottom of your foot, the cold sole, and feeling that. So, yeah. Where was it? Where did that go? Danette Bermea says, I like the contrast between furry winter and bare skin summer, but what does it mean beyond that? Yeah, to me, I think it's a great setup for a poem, but because we don't get into the peculiars, maybe, we don't get a sense of beyond the describing this, what was the point of the poem? I think we have trouble getting into that. D. Coleman says maybe a few gerunds would help a bit. That said, I think it's a lovely poem. Well, let's keep going. Oh, yeah. Where was I? like unwinding a wound to let it breathe, and you can't help touching the edges, testing the core with gentle fingers, feeling the flesh getting young again. And loving you is knowing summer will shear your fur down to the smooth skin, and all those hot months you will stick to me, and the rhythm of the ceiling fan won't break up our dance, which has that slower beat. So I think, and this is where the poem feels like it sort of runs out of what it wants to say, and instead you need to take some kind of turn or move into something different. Like, could this be a metaphor for something like deeper in the relationship, like the rhythms of a relationship, the ups and downs, the times you need comfort versus the time you need to be, cool? Is there something there? I mean, not necessarily that, but is there something like deeper to this story, besides for just thinking about the legs themselves that we can move to? Because we've entered the poem really well. We have a lot of music. There's a lot of great descriptions. We're feeling along with it, but we're waiting for something interesting to happen at the end. And here we start we end up repeating ourselves. So, and the rhythm of the ceiling fan won't break up our dance, which has that slower beat. And it's knowing that those months end, that you will catch a shiver before we realize it's time to give up bare-legged sleeping, and your thighs will explode. I think the explode is a wrong word there. I think we need a different word for that, explode, into mine. And I'll be pricked 10,000 times, like my skin is waking up after going numb. I like that, waking up after going numb. But do you see what I mean? How this, it could be a layer on a movement about relationships or something else. It doesn't even have to be about relationships. It could be about it's a meta. It feels like there's just another layer here that's like waiting to be explored, but hasn't been explored yet. Yeah. David Booth says, and maybe this is what I'm sensing it here. He says, I like the idea that the end of one thing is remembering what's coming, but I don't feel a deeper expression of that in the poem. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So maybe that's the way to broaden it. It's to explore that concept more. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Read that. And it's knowing that those months end, that you will catch a shiver before we realize it's time to give up bare-legged sleeping, and your thighs will explode into mine, and I'll be pricked 10,000 times, like my skin is waking up after going numb, like I've been laying with you, forgetting your other textures, and how the end of one thing is remembering what's coming. One little note, technically laying is to set something down. And so it's really lying. That very confusing verb. Yeah. Yeah, but there is yeah. So is that Bermia says lovely descriptions and musicality, but missing any depth. And this is one of those poems that's hard to say that there's it's hard to pick out individual things to fix or work on, because there's a great rhythm, great music, great images. It's just a matter of pushing forward and making the poem have more layers to it. And we could think of different ways we can turn. Like, we can make this an extended metaphor for something like we were talking about. We could turn to a memory that it brings up. We could turn to anything in that direction. As Chelsea McClellan, this is a great way to put it. The final line feels to me like a false revelation, something we already know. I wonder what would come if you push past that ending. Yeah, and that's the thing. So there's really a well-written, musically crafted poem, but just hasn't gotten to the end. Mary Ellen Carr says, this sounds like you were too afraid to be sensual or sexual. Yeah. And so a great poem to start, but we need some kind of turn, some kind of surprise, and it doesn't feel quite there yet. And I think you could, there's a point somewhere around here where it just sort of turned in on itself and sort of looped around instead of pushing forward somewhere else. So there's that. Let's see. Yeah. Tara Meslick McMahon says, suggest to leap altogether somewhere else after getting young again. So many places to leap from there. You can come back to a few lines. Those lovely sensual shear your fur. Yeah. So this is a poem that just in waiting of a turn. Let's move on to the next one. We're almost at the point of climax when I realize our bodies. And then it's one of those poems that reads into the first line. We're almost at the point of climax when I realize our bodies have always been a jar of sand art from someone else's summer camp days, abandoned on the shelf near the back of the thrift store. Sunlight filthy from the filter of those high unwashed windows is as warm as we're making each other now. And I can't remember any of the careless sticks jabbing at either of us, but I see how those pokes made our patterns mesh, and we've made it all this time without being shaken, dumped out, left in a storm, and struck by the dark magic of lightning, which stands the chance of melting us, molding us into one blazing lump, splitting this cold container, finally spilling us all over the floor, a swirl of panting color and shards. I would bet gets a gasp from whoever stumbles on us. I can imagine a moment's pause before they're off for a broom. Maybe that one, long smoothed by the touch of hundreds of hands, now so gentle on the next holder for it. Yeah, Kimberly Gibson Tran says, all this time without being shaken. Great. And Hal York, quite an opening metaphor. Yeah. We're almost at the point of climax when I realize our bodies have always been a jar of sand art from someone else's summer camp. I think the summer camp days, I think the days I would cut, it feels a little clunky there, and I don't know why from someone else's summer camp works just as well. Abandoned on the shelf near the back of the thrift store. And again, it is a great opening, great metaphor. Sunlight, filthy from the filter of those high unwashed windows, is as warm as we're making each other now. So we extend the metaphor into that and share that color comes forth. And I can't remember any of the careless sticks jabbing at either of us, but I see how those pokes made our patterns mesh. And we've made it all this time without being shaken, dumped out, left in a storm, and struck by the dark magic of lightning, which stands the chance of melting us, molding us into one blazing lump, splitting this cool container, finally spilling all over the floor. And what I was reading for was, I felt like the poem maybe should have ended sooner. Unlike the last one, I felt like there was a great extended metaphor here that pushed forward and had some an interesting place to go, but then it sort of again wound over itself and continued on. I think both these two poems, they found interesting material and then didn't have a big leap. But I think this one, unlike the last one, contains enough of a sort of a surprise and enough interesting content to stand up on its own without trying to push it forward. It already has the metaphor there, and now every time you see some sand art, you'll think of this, and so I think that works really well, and it goes a little too far. So I wondered if there was a spot that we could just stop and, finally spilling us all over the floor, maybe. I'll keep reading. A swirl of panting color and shards, I would bet gets a gasp from whoever stumbles on us. I can imagine a moment's pause before they're off for a broom. Maybe that one, long smoothed by the touch of hundreds of hands, now so gentle on the next holder for it. But I do like more. So I think maybe, I like the movement to this broom, and I like the gasp. So maybe it's more the clunkiness of this. I think maybe the problem is it's a little bit just too. It could happen more swiftly and more concisely, and maybe that's all it's missing. Because I think the now so gentle on the next holder for it is a sort of awkward way to end the last line. What if it maybe just cut the last line by the touch of hundreds of hands is a way to end it, and that sort of brings everybody together in the fact that we're all sort of doing this type of thing. Yeah. Yeah. See, so I like it falling on the floor, and I like the gasp. Let's see. So I think it's just a matter of condensing the end. Actually, the more that I look at it, so if we say, molding us into one blazing lump, splitting this this old cool container, finally spilling us. I think I might. The old cool container is a little bit too much too. maybe condense that a little bit, but finally spilling us all over the floor, a swirl of panting color and shards. I like panting color a lot. And shards, I would bet, gets a gasp from whoever stumbles on us. I think maybe just, it's not much of a cut, but maybe just I can imagine a moment's pause. Maybe cutting that. I would bet gets a gasp from whoever stumbles on us before they're off for a broom. Maybe that one, long smoothed by the touch of hundreds of hands, and then end there. So really, I think maybe it's just all I really sensed and wanted to do was cut this line and this line. And I think that streamlines the end enough where it stays, powerful. So I like that. To me, that's maybe what I do. And as Morgan Feeney says, old cool sounds wrong. Maybe it should be cool old. Something sounds particular to my ear. And I agree. It just sounds like the wrong description and the wrong use of diction, and it just doesn't feel right there. So something different, maybe even cut that. Let's see. Let's see. Dick Westheimer says, as one who has written climaxes in quite a few poems, I find it more powerful if they actually climax. They are earned and not necessarily explicitly called out. Yeah. Kimberly Gibson Tran says, interesting that we end on the broom handle being touched by hundreds of hands, but I sort of wish to complete the metaphor we were holding the glass of the bottle or sifting the sand with our hands. Well, I like the broom handle because it's surprising. It's one of those things where we have this metaphor set up, and then it sort of completes itself. It fulfills like the promise of the extended metaphor by making like both the lovemaking now and the whole relationship sort of being there. Somebody mentioned too, by the way, that the sticks, you might not know if you didn't do this when you're in like kindergarten but they have like, you do layers of sand and then you use sticks to sort of push in little patterns, like a toothpick maybe, and you can kind of make different patterns in the sand. And that's one of the ways you make sand art in a jar. So if you don't know that spot might be confusing. Jesse says, I like that it ends on such a tactile note with the broom handle. Sharon Friday says, I just wrote a climax poem. It has 6 words. I'm interested in hearing that. Petty Harper says, I wanted to be inside this poem, but not familiar with the sand jar art. Maybe that needs to be a little bit described a little bit more. The layers and the way that works with just a line. Okay. Well, anyway, yeah, so these are good poems. And both, I think it's interesting, why we have 2 poems that we like to share is so you can look at what they have in common and what's sort of the pattern that's emerging. And the pattern here is that the poem is really set up, and then it turns back to itself and sort of hovers there a little bit when it could either be condensed and be confident in its ending without writing past it a little bit, or by going somewhere different. And I think that's the, yeah. And Shibafu says climax is more backdrop than point here. I like it. Yeah, I do too. I actually do. I think it would be, it wouldn't really fit what we're really talking about if we focused a lot on that. And David Booth says lots of nice music and metaphor. Yeah. And as far as, line by line, I think the poem just works. Just a few things I would cut. And this one works really well. Okay, let's move on to the next. Thanks for sharing that, Ryan. Wonderful poems as always. Now let's see if I can find, because I always forget as I'm looking through for the folks with the handles instead of their names listed, because I'm just scrolling through looking for names that are familiar. And let's see. Let's see. If I search, yeah. Okay, so yeah, Shape of Soup is in the title here. We'll do this one. This is Shape of Soup. Michael Rolane. Michael said this, and this is a submission from April 9th. Tim, thanks so much for your useful feedback on my first submission. For these poems, I'd love any input you have on the use and effectiveness of word economy, form, imagery, repetition, and abstraction, plus any other observations you feel are relevant. Also, I'm working hard on balancing nuance with accessibility, so any thoughts on that would be greatly appreciated. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Pet peeve. And these are some pretty short, concise poems, so that's good because I will get through some other folk stuff too. So again, this is Mike Rolane, Shape of Soup from Georgia. Pet peeve. Hold on, beloved, too free, too adventurous to leave out in the yard. A doggy bag drifts aimlessly through trees, snagging a branch, whipping out about like a doggy bag, ripping apart. So that's interesting. Pet peeve. Let's read it one more time. Hold on, beloved, too free, too adventurous to leave out in the yard. A doggy bag drifts aimlessly through trees, snagging a branch, whipping out like a doggy bag, ripping apart. So it's fun to read, and it's a short poem. It's, especially the second half. A lot of times it feels like sometimes poems can get caught up in the sound and you sort of too much fall in love with the music of that. And because it's so short, I think it works here. I have a little trouble, I like the title. There's sort of a pun and a playfulness on pet peeve. I have a little trouble understanding the first stanza. Yes. Morgan Phoenix says the comma use in the first stanza confuses me a bit. Hold on, beloved, too free. And so should there be another comma after beloved? But it makes it feel like beloved is too free. Yeah, as Jamie Thomas says, I'm trying very hard and I love the way it sounds, but I don't know what it's about yet. And I'm a little, once the doggy bag comes, drifting aimlessly through the trees, I can really see that, snagging a branch, whipping about like a doggy bag, ripping apart. Yeah. Dry Montero says it does move like a bag in the wind. It definitely does. Yeah, B says is beloved the name of the pet. Yeah, so I'm not quite sure. Does the bag... once the... Jeanette Bermea says, is the pet peeve the empty plastic bag floating around? That's the thing we have very clearly. But I'm not... hold on... Beloved. I think there should just be a comma after beloved. Too free, too adventurous to leave out in the yard. I don't know. I get a little lost in that beginning, and I just can't really resolve it. Mary Keating says the dog is too adventurous to be left free to roam. Yeah, it's a little too unclear. I like the music. It's fun to read. But it's a little too clear. Yeah, poop bag is what it is. But it doesn't have poop in it because it doesn't float. If it does, yeah. Dizzy Cochrane says I feel stuck on the outside of this poem. Yeah, that's right. I just don't know where we are. The doggy bag drifting I get. If the poem cut the first half, and just started with a doggy bag, I wouldn't feel like I lost anything because I don't understand that first part. Who is too free and who too adventurous to leave out in the yard? The bag itself? Yeah, Morgan Phoenix is beloved, one of those words we just don't want to use too much in poetry. Show, don't tell. I don't get much from it. Beloved is a poem that doesn't occur that much in contemporary poetry, and I don't think it, where I should ask, I keep meaning to ask Gregory Orr to be on the Rattlecast, but he has that, considering the book that is the body of the beloved that is the world, and his poems are full of beloved, and it's what Leon Lee was talking about so much, that beloved, whatever that is, that mystery out in the universe. I don't know, but not too many poets use it, so it doesn't feel cliche necessarily. But maybe if you started with a doggy bag, just cut that and then pushed past and seeing what else could happen after ripping apart. But I just don't understand. Let's take a look at the next poem. I followed Miss Pac-Man to the ends of the earth. And where am I going? Ends of the earth. Her bow as my beacon, she guided me home, threading her apparitions, clearing my distractions, pothole dreams and phantom crossroads cruising past New Hope. Its own dark path where blood-thirsty priests and cherry-lit maidens surely lie. I fell behind, collecting dots. Yeah. Well, this I think we're a little more grounded. I'm not sure why we're following Miss Pac-Man. And I think maybe that's a metaphor for who. Yeah. So the whole thing is a metaphor for a romantic relationship, I think. Let's see. I followed Miss Pac-Man to the ends of the earth. Her bow was my beacon. She guided me home. See, I like that a lot. Her bow is my beacon is a really nice line. Threading her apparitions, clearing my distractions, pothole dreams, and phantom crossroads, cruising past New Hope. And this is where I start to feel lost. And maybe it's references that I just don't get. But I'm not sure what New Hope is, and what the pothole dreams are either. Are there potholes in Pac-Man? I start to feel lost at this point. Its own dark path where bloodthirsty priests. Are there priests in Pac-Man? Maybe there are. Maybe I just don't know the game well enough. Yeah, I know the Cherry and Ghosts. But what is New Hope? New Hope is a town in eastern Pennsylvania, or is it Rhode Island? Yeah, so I'm not sure what that is. Is that where the poet lives? I don't know. So thirsty priest, I don't understand either. Cherry-lipped maidens surely lie. I fell behind collecting dots. The collecting dots is kind of fun. So, yeah, so Kimberly Gibson Trent says there are ghosts in Pac-Man. Why don't we get more ghosts, more Pac-Man imagery? Amy Redacted says it feels like that one game or movie about the retro games. Yeah, Dick Westheimer says, to shape a soup, I think one of the primary lessons I learned from Critique of the Week is this notion of grounding. Tim just mentioned a small nod to the journalistic, even if very small, is key to welcoming in readers. Yeah, and it's just a matter of having us being situated enough so we can appreciate what you're writing. And I think, while there's cleverness and wordplay and there's music in this poem, it doesn't feel like it's welcoming me in because I don't know. And nobody's mentioned that the bloodthirsty priests in New Hope have anything to do with Pac-Man. I mean, I'm not really well versed in that game, but yeah. I mean, I could Google it really quick. Let's see. Are there priests in Pac-Man? I don't know. I think maybe there's because there's something called Pac-Man Party that has a kind of priest named Patra, a black jackal that resembles the Egyptian god. She's a priestess. I don't know. See, I don't know. I don't know where we're going with this. And it has me guessing. And, the currency of the modern era is attention. And I pay some attention to this poem, but I don't have enough to be sifting through figuring out Pac-Man. Somebody suggested, this might be a great place for a game magazine, if that works. And maybe, I mean, it could be a more narrowly focused poem that works for people who know what these things are. But yeah, just feel too lost. And maybe just more of the basic Pac-Man imagery, if that's what we're going to be doing. Jamie Thomas says, I wonder if replacing the New Hope and priest stanzas with more personal connection would help. Like, why? How does it relate to Miss Pac-Man? Yeah. Yeah. So just let us in a little more. I mean, I like the music. I like the brevity. I like the playfulness. Just don't feel like I can connect because I don't know the situation, the background. So I feel a little lost with this stuff. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thanks for it. Jesse Cochran points out the original question was about economy. I think we've lost grounding in this economy. Yeah, and that's the problem. And we need just a way to situate ourselves, to know who the speaker is and what the situation is, so that we can enter and be a part of it and participate in it. If you, it's sort of like if you're told to walk on stage and you have to act out this part. If you get some stuff to play with, you can go along with it. But if but if you're, but if you don't know where you are, it's hard to sort of fit within the scene. I think that's where we're left. Tara Mesokic Man says, I'm not sure what this presentation does to help my enjoyment. If a prose poem, I read faster, finding the fun like playing the game. Tim, the craft thoughts of this kind of presentation. And so, to me, I think of line breaks in the shape of a poem. There are a couple things that they do. First of all, the very first impression before you even read the poem is what we call around here plating poems, and it's like plating food. We want to have a sense of what we're about to eat, and if we show that we know what we're doing, that things are carefully done, that there's a reason for being the shapes that they are, we have more confidence going into the poem. And if you have a sort of a rougher and more difficult shape that seems more random, you're left sort of beginning in a different place. It's like that, you never have a second chance to make a first impression. Your first impression is always the shape of the poem. So there's that, just a first glance kind of feel of it, and whether or not, how much confidence you're going to have, how wild a poem is going to be. There's things like that you just sort of implicitly feel like when you look at a poem, if it's, how carefully it's been crafted and put together. And then after that, though, and the bigger thing is that the lines themselves are kind of like a pace car for reading. Reading or poetry is the music of speech, but we don't have like a formalized sheet music for it. Instead, we have just the syntax of sentences, the way speech is broken up, the poetic structure of all that makes us read at a certain pace in a certain way. And then also the line breaks, which every time you have to scan back, even though it's your fastest muscle in your body is that ballistic eye movement, you shoot back to the other side to read the beginning of the sentence, it's still a brief pause. And so every time you have to move like that, not at the regular pace of the verse, but you turn and jump to somewhere new, you kind of slow down. And the white space creates more of a silence around the poem too. So what this shape does is slows us down around the words home and pothole and new hope, and slows down the reading of the poem generally, and has this kind of, pieced out feel. And if you want, it's something, depending on the context of the poem, that can be a good thing or a bad thing. It can fit if it's a more narrative poem. You want people to just be imagining, sort of losing themselves on the page, not being as focused on the sound, but pulling more back into the movie that's playing in the mind's eye as the poem is rolling forward in a narrative way. You don't want to have those kind of distracting leaps in the poem that make you read in a different way and sort of alter the pace of the reading. But if you have a poem where you're sort of laying out images and concepts more slowly, this can be like a way to add, like sometimes if you're doing some kind of chemistry experiment and you add like a little drop of hydrochloric acid and the whole thing blows up, like that one word cherry might be an important word that changes everything, and you can sort of drip it on there by isolating it out like that in its own little line. So that can work too. It depends on what kind of potion you're brewing, so to speak. So that's how the shape of the poem works. That's a little speech on the shape, and you tend to read shorter lines more slowly because you're more delicately placing each line and each sound phrase line by line as you go. So you'd read this poem a little more slowly. And if you look back, even though I tend to read things fast myself, it's still a little slower than other poems. Chelsea McClellan says, Shaper Shoop, I got the impression from this one that the falling behind collecting dots has something to do with unjust authority figures, priests, but I'm not confident in that. Wish it were more obvious. Yeah. I think maybe something to do, to me, with the Pac-Man, Miss Pac-Man collecting the cherries, which I think allow you to eat the ghosts. but he's too busy collecting the little dots, like doing it. There's like kind of two ways you can play. There's like a slower way where you're like trying to get rid of all the dots, methodically, or you can go after the ghosts and you get more points, I think, by eating the cherries and going after the ghosts. I mean, I don't play this game much, but I think that's how it works. So I think that's what it's saying, that Miss Pac-Man sort of rushes a little more. But I could be just misinterpreting that completely. Kimberly Gibson Trent says, I could see a version of this as a prose poem, concrete poem with the trails through it like the Pac-Man game. If the poem shape did that work, the text could be entirely about something else. Oh, that's an interesting concept. Okay. So anyway, we're going to move on. Thanks for sharing that. Hope it was helpful, Mike. Yeah. Jamie Thomas says, I adore poems with pop culture references. This scratched an itch, and I hope to see its revision. Yeah, it would be fun to see a Pac-Man poem that really goes into depth and does interesting things. Yeah. Morgan Phoenix says, oh, maybe I don't understand how Pac-Man works at all. I could be wrong. I think when Katie and I took the kids to the Grand Canyon, we stayed in this geodesic dome, and we picked the one that was Pac-Man themed. So there was a Pac-Man video game that like came with the sort of glamping room. This was last year, and so we played some Pac-Man there. We also have Pac-Man at the Cat Arcade in Wrightwood. There's this place where you can go and you can adopt kittens as a animal shelter that are just roaming around an arcade, which is a kind of great concept. But there's a Pac-Man game there. It's like the only 2 times I've ever played Pac-Man in my life. But this is what I gleaned from those 2 times. Anyway, that's Shape of Soup, a.k.a. Michael Rolane. So thanks for sharing those. Let's go on to a couple more poems, and we'll try to be quicker so we can get to a couple more before we got to go. I just have to clear out this. Okay. So Morgan Phoenix says, Jamie Thomas says, Tim is describing my version of heaven right now. It is an amazing concept. I love, it's in Wrightwood, back in California, and it is called the Purr Grounds. I always want to say Purr Palace because I like the alliteration, I guess, but it's the Purr Grounds, right? But anyway, it's a great idea. It's a nonprofit, so they're adopting off the cats. People can donate. You pay to go in to play video games, and then the cats are so cute that you want to adopt the cats. It's really fun. So somebody should adopt that business model in a bigger town with a population that can sustain it, I would say. Okay, let's take a look. Let's see. We've skipped Parthasarkar a bunch because they submit a lot, but let's read this one really quick. This is Parthasarkar from India. We'll take a look. Here we go. A fossil with green passport. The fossil with green passport. Have seen much bloodless shine, sweat and smoke together, the opium and inland water. A fossil with green passport. A pureless nightmare since midnight, wants to open the door to flee from the love. A fossil with green passport. Goes toward the junction but cannot meet, a faith on the corpse with a punctuation. A fossil with green passport. Yeah. So, so this, I think it's interesting and strange, but I don't know what to make of it. I like the repetition of the fossil with green passport. It's very bizarre. Amy Redacted says, I already reminded of that poem about the guy in Bombay on the floor. I'm not sure what that's referring to. But yeah, Hallie York says, yikes, I'm lost. Yeah, I don't really know. A fossil with green passport. There's some ways, me and Katie were reading Dean Young last night, and there's a way that when you read one poem by Dean Young, we were reading Embryo-Yo, you read one poem and it's like this marvelously strange, leaping collage if you're not sure quite what's going on, but you kind of get it and it's fun. But then when you read 5 poems in a row, to me, it seems kind of like a gimmick and it sort of loses its energy. And so I don't know. I mean, that's just how I feel about poems that leap and are strange like this. And this, even though it's sort of, the Dean Young poems, or I mean, there are other poets that do that too. But the sort of surreal abstraction and the leaping around and the not quite connecting with context or narrative, it can be interesting, but they tend to be a lot richer and fuller, and having more details going on. But the Fossil with Green Passport has that feel. Like there's some kind of energy there that's interesting. And yeah, and so that's nice. The Fossil with Green Passport. Don't know what it means. Have seen much bloodless sunshine, sweat, and smoke together the opium and inland water. I don't know what to make of that. The Fossil with Green Passport. A peerless nightmare since midnight wants to open the door to flee from love. But who is the nightmare and who's fleeing from love? I just don't know. A Fossil with Green Passport. Goes toward the junction but cannot meet a faith of the corpse with a punctuation. See, this is completely unglossable to me. But then a Fossil with Green Passport is sort of, there's something fascinating about that. So, I don't know. Jamie Thomas says, I thought it is an old woman with a new passport, like starting a new journey at her big age. Could be. Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, if we had, I think just we had a little more to go on in the in-between. Like the structure of the poem, I think, works, but there's just not quite enough for me. And somebody mentioned, and sorry, I missed it, the love and faith, they like it besides for those elements, and that we can't resolve that is really the problem. Yeah, Morgan Phoenix says it could be so many things we just can't know. And Amy Redacted says, where's the meat? Yeah. So it's like this interesting kernel, like a little zygote of a poem. I like it in that regard, but I want more. I want to have it come together more coherently so I can appreciate it. Okay, we're going to move on to another poet. And next, let's go with, we're looking back. This is the December 16th poem submitted here. Sarah Pottinger from, looks like Great Britain. Yeah, Great Britain from Norwich. And no questions. Let's go. Written on a train to visit Dad is the first poem, kind of long, and then I have a shorter poem too. So here, there's a two-pager. It's not that long. Written on the train to visit Dad. Let's see what we've got here. Written on the train to visit Dad. I want to say something meaningful, to find truth through poetry. Before I read, look at how the difference, and it's not like there's something wrong with it. But feel the difference between that and the way that the last poem, Morgan Phoenix says Norwich. Thanks, Morgan. Is how to pronounce that. The W is silent. But notice how in this, the ragged lines and the way there's no consistency to it. It creates already you're sensing a very free, unpolished kind of poem. And if that fits the speaker's voice, it can work really well. You don't want to, so it can work, but you already have an assumption or a whole set of assumptions based on just glancing at the shape of this poem. And that's one of the things that we talk about is the plating of it. So it's plated in a way that's very sort of, all over the bowl, as it were. So written on the train to visit Dad, I want to say something meaningful, to find truth through poetry and make something beautiful, but my lumpy metaphors and flowery words feel trite. I guess I'm sad. But I want something more eloquent. I want the icy violence of Sylvia Plath, who was so much more than sad, who was, in fact, like my dad, although he chose pills. Less dramatic than a head in the oven, and also less effective as Plath hers. 4 weeks... herself, 4 weeks in a coma, and he hasn't tried again. Not anything, living or dying, for 15 years. He's bird thin and hollow-boned, doubly incontinent, shuffling from... I'm sorry, I have this. I put these up to make sure I don't accidentally show anybody's, email address and stuff, but okay. Not anything, living or dying, for 15 years. He's bird thin and hollow boned, doubly incontinent, shuffling from bed to chair, coughing and wheezing, but there is nothing wrong with him, nothing that eating and moving and trying won't fix. He won't, though. Not it's not maudlin. I just know it's a cancer in his mind, a malignant and metastasizing. It stopped responding to prescriptions, and he refuses other treatment. He's waiting with his head in the sandy oven of time. It's his 70th birthday tomorrow, and I'm visiting him because there's no one else who will. No one else who will bathe in the cigarette smoke, pretend it covers the smell of shit, and act as though they don't know how shitty this is. And I don't have any nice words, none of Dylan Thomas's flapping sails and dying light, nothing that makes it meaningful, nothing that feels right. What can I write that doesn't sound ungrateful, selfish, self-centered, unkind? What can I say that won't echo an angry teenage mind freshly hurt from when he first tried, from when I first saw it, his depression and suicide? How can I say I'm angry, honestly, usefully angry? I may as well stump my foot and shake my fist at the sky. How can I say I'm sad, unselfishly, indignantly sad? When I am being selfish and trying to believe that it's not always bad to step back from the pit, to leave since I can't save him from, and too much trying will pull me in, to say this despicable, sensible solution is necessary and right, to call instead of visiting, to talk about me, not him, to go home to my partner and try to be happy and not think about what might have been, not to think about how it shadows my life. Am I happy? Am I sad lately? What could that mean? Am I dwelling too much, or repressing, or worse, what have I not seen? What did I miss when we last said goodbye? Did he seem down when we talked? Why was my partner sighing today? Does my mom seem sad? Is my sister okay? It's endless, so that's the end of it, except it's not. It won't be until that final, dreadfully freeing horizon. How could I want that? How could I want to say goodbye to my dad, who helped me with homework, read bedtime stories, and swung me around in a towel after baths, who showed me the worlds inside books, who gave me dreams in Graceland and Blue, and who is still in there and sometimes, some days, pokes through. So I write, I journal, I write poems, awkward, aimless, self-indulgent poems that never quite feel quite true and never sound quite right, because I don't know how I feel and I don't know what is right. Yeah. Okay, so this poem, that we sort of, it's aware of itself at the end, because it has this, so I write, I journal, I write poems, awkward, aimless, self-indulgent poems that never feel quite true, never sound quite right. And, if there's a journalistic feel to this, a diaristic feel, where, we're sort of spilling out onto the page, psychological perspective, it's really important to be doing this. I think if more people, wrote in expressive writing, we would be a healthier and happier people. And that's just truth, fact of it. We can also learn a lot in the process of doing that. It's just great from that perspective. But if we're presenting the poem and trying to share and connect with other people over it, as Danette Burmia says, this is more of a brain dump that needs a lot of editing and economy. And so focusing on figuring out where, it's great to write. A lot of people, there's different ways to write. I think often people start out with this sort of maximalist, dump everything on the page. There's no such thing as a shitty rough draft. You just let your fingers run with it. You go as fast as you can, and then you read back and pick out the things, see where you caught a current of interesting stuff. And the key to that style of writing, and some people just do that forever, and that's how they write, is to be able to notice what's interesting and compelling and what's not, and then cut the stuff that's not and keep the stuff that's compelling. And so written on the train to visit Dad, I think it's a good setup. We start to know already what we're going, some of what's going on. We're situated within a place in a certain moment in time. So it's a good title. I want to say something meaningful, to find the truth through poetry. Like this, we're sort of preloading what we have here. But once we get to, we have this sort of run on Sylvia Plath, which there's some interest there. But then, where was it? It's his 70th birthday tomorrow, and I'm visiting him because there's no one else who will. No one else who will bathe in the cigarette smoke, pretend it covers the smell of shit, and act as though they don't know how shitty this is. And I don't have any nice words. None of Dylan Thomas's flapping sails and dying night. Nothing makes it meaningful. Nothing that feels right. And so it's this section here where there's actually a poem. There's that sense, I'm visiting my dad. If we just leapt from written on the train to visit dad, it's his 70th birthday tomorrow, and I'm visiting him because there's no one else who will. No one else who will bathe in his cigarette smoke. See, and we have the detail, the specific detail of the bathing in cigarette smoke and the pretending it covers the smell of shit. There's a way that, so what it really is that, and I don't know how much you want to drill down into this, but it's the right brain that is that subconscious, holistic being that understands more than you realize you know. And it speaks in symbols, and it speaks in images and details. And we're transferring these ideas from, your right brain to my right brain, that other way of understanding that's more symbolic, that thinks in dreams and metaphor, and it's really the place of dreams. And so when images start to come out, when specific details start to come out on their own, that's when that magical right brain thing is needed, is being used. And we want to listen for that. And the other thing you can notice, see how the lines are really ragged? And there's no sense of how long a line should be. The rhythm is sort of all over the place. Then we get to this one spot where the poem sort of emerges. All of a sudden it has a sort of more regular shape. It fits. It looks like, if you cut the rest out, it looks more consistently like a poem too. And so you can notice that, like when you have, and so when you're writing, you're going through, you're pushing out this rough draft, or just spilling whatever out on the page. You have to look back and listen and look at the shape and see where you had a kind of energy build. And the energy is coming from a deeper inside place. In Jack Rape's classes, we call that the deep voice. But that's the voice of the subconscious, the deeper down. And once that starts coming out, we follow that as long as we can. And then we notice when we lost the thread, when we fell off that train, no pun intended. And so we go back then after that, the smoke and the flapping sails and dying light, that was really nice. We go back to, what can I write about that doesn't sound ungrateful, selfish, self-centered, unkind? That's the other voice. That's the left brain that is getting in the way of the creative energy of the right brain. And so we want to, push that aside, delete that, and find the next spot where we had the energy of that subconscious motivation that was really driving. It's the engine of poetry. And so we want to find that again. And so that's what you want to do when you look at these poems. And just cut out the stuff that's not working, and stick with the stuff that does, and try to find that voice. Feel how you felt in the moment of that voice. Look for that voice on the pages of your drafts, and then put those moments together, and that's what becomes poetry. And cut all the rest. Let's take a look at the second poem. This is On the Tube at Night. His knees, like divorcees, sit far apart in suit pants, gray and formal, but crinkling at the crotch as he sat down and slid forward, top of the thigh pointed at by legs and tie. Also formal, dark purple and stark against the white shirt, bookended by black hair and shoes, no jazzy socks, they're plain, gray as rocks, close-cropped hair, longer on top, not fat, not thin, with a strong jaw and stubble chin. Eye color, unknown. Since he's engaged in looking through his phone, gray suit jacket, single-breasted, strong arms, broad-chested. I spread my legs and slouch like him, flick through my phone, jet out my chin. I cross my ankle on my knee and imagine I am also he. Pretend my shoulders run straight to my hips, that my hair is short with styled wax tips, that a tie would run flat down my chest, that I have a choice when it comes to the breast. A businessman, a suit, a bro is talking, no fear of self-consciousness when walking through a crowded bar or pub, no reason to watch his drink at a club. And that superpower of a two-piece suit, a white shirt, and polished boot, that means that everywhere he goes he looks smart, presentable, and everyone knows he's a wealthy, stand-up guy with a firm handshake and sensible tie. I sound bitter, and perhaps I am, as by chance I wasn't born a man. Not that it's something I really want to be, but I would, I think, like to be that free. Yeah. And so this one, let's see. So this is one of those poems that you see a lot where we fall in love with our own rhyme. And So if you read the beginning, there's no rhyme in the first few lines. His knees like divorcees. There's that internal rhyme. And I think maybe what happened in the writing process, like we just sort of fall in love with the sing-songy nature of rhyming, and we start to sort of pump out the rhymes. And the problem with that, there's two ways to use rhyme. You can use rhyme to sort of write toward the rhyme, or to write towards something surprising. And if you're writing and picking out words that take you in different directions and new places and surprise you, that's working. But if you're writing toward the first rhyme you think of, then the rhyme itself is guiding your poem. And it's sort of the linguistic coincidence of the words fitting together instead of the surprises that draws forth. And so if you're going to rhyme, like know that you're going to rhyme and know that you're going to have to vary that and use it and pay attention to where it was regular and not. And don't fall in love with that easy, quick first rhyme that we come to think of. Because I think you can feel that here. And rhyming poems are great. I prefer myself personally, formal verse that's traditional rhyme. But you have to be very conscious while you're playing with that to make it so it doesn't come across as sing-songy and doesn't draw you into directions in the poem that are sort of prescribed and too easy. So again, we have a title, On the Tube at Night, which is similar to the last title. The last one was On the Train to My Dad, so we're on the tube. His knees, like divorcees, sit far apart in suit pants, gray and formal, but crinkling at the crotch as he sat down and slid forward, top of the thigh pointed at by legs and tie. Now, it's a little clunky, but I like that we're getting into a good description. I think there's it could be said a little more smoothly, but we are getting into the description of the suit, which I think works really well. Also formal, dark purple and stark against the white shirt. And see how this dark purple and stark against the white shirt, because that rhymes like buried within the line itself and comes at an unusual place. It works better than rhymes other places. Bookended by black hair and shoes, no jazzy socks. They're plain, gray as rocks. So the gray as rocks, this is in here. Do you feel a difference? It's because socks makes you think of rocks, and then makes you describe them plain as rocks. There's this sort of the rhyme is doing too much of the work. It's like taking over your imagination, and this is where it falls into that trap. Where we had this nice rhyme here, and so we're thinking we want to keep rhymes going, and then we're letting the rhyme write the poem for us instead of letting our imagination write the poem. And if you read a lot of poems, you can hear that happening sort of in real time as you read, and that's what's happening here. So you really want to avoid this trap, and it happens to me too as I'm writing poems. Sometimes I fall in love with the rhymes that are going on, and you lose the thread of creativity that you're sort of unlocking when you're writing the poem. And you can feel that happening here, and then it really picks up throughout the rest of the poem. So I would delete gray of rocks, describe them in a different way. Close cropped hair, longer on top, not fat, not thin, with a strong jaw and stubbled chin. And here again, we get that same, it's so close, and it's the first word you think of. Eye color, unknown. Since he's engaged in looking through his phone, gray suit. See, the phone and unknown are a little bit better because it's a more surprising rhyme. And it comes at a surprising time. Like the unknown, because the line breaks partially and because of where that's at, it makes the phone surprising. So that's a good rhyme. And you have to be able to tell the difference if you're going to be using rhyme. I guess that's the point. Because there's rhyme that just takes you out of the energy of the poem. Anyway, gray suit jacket. I feel like we've sort of repeated the gray suit jacket a little too much. We're to describe the same thing over and over again. But so we're sort of repeating ourselves with the description a little bit here. But single-breasted, strong arms, bare-chested. It's again the breasted-chested. I spread my legs and slouch like him, flick through my phone, jet out my chin. I cross my ankle on my knee and imagine I am also he. And again, that's not how you would say it unless you were writing toward that rhyme. We had the knee and it's making you think he. And you want if you're going to be rhyming, like think of words that are, you know you have a rhyme coming up. You want to think about words that you're not thinking of, that are surprising to you. And then you want to see if you can move the poem toward that, and that's why you can use rhyme. And the people that are formal poets that use rhyme all the time, like Rena Espaillat, if you go back and look at her Rattlecast a long time ago, but she's one of the best formal poets alive, she talks about finding rhymes that are surprising and using that as like a scaffolding to build a poem that goes into surprising places. And that's what you want to do. You want to find near rhymes, slant rhymes, surprising rhymes, rhymes that are different parts of speech. So it's like you're rhyming a verb with a noun. That's something that A.E. Stallings talks about a lot. But you want to use rhyme as a tool to surprise yourself, not a tool to push the poem forward where the rhyme takes you. So anyway, I cross my ankle on my knee and imagine I am also he. Pretend my shoulders run straight to my hips, that my hair is short with styled wax tips, that a tie would run flat down my chest, that I have a choice when it comes to the breast. So if we had, if we wanted to have a poem, you could read someone like Philip Larkin or something, is a poet who, has a lot of really, really, rhymes that are strong and close together, and that you could have a whole poem like that. But it's the voice that isn't in this voice all the time that works, or that doesn't work. Yeah. Mary King says description should enhance the poem, not weigh it down. I feel like the description goes on too long and distracts me. Yeah. Tom Morello says, is the use of bro appropriate? I don't know what appropriate means in a poem. Anything's appropriate if you can pull it off. But Danette Burmia says bro seems out of place here, too informal. I don't know. I don't know. I disagree. I think the whole poem is sort of pretty informal. And I think we're going a businessman, a suit, a bro. We're moving down in register in this line, talking about it. There's different ways to describe the same person. There's like a formal way, a less formal way, and an even less formal way. And I think it's fine to me. Is talking no fear of or self-consciousness when walking through a crowded bar or pub. No reason to watch his drink at a club. Again, we get the pub club. Just the rhymes are just running this poem instead of letting the poem surprise you. And that superpower of a two-piece suit, a white shirt, and a polished boot. And again, if we had the whole poem working in this way, and we were very conscious of the rhyme, if we were actually counting the beats and making sure we had, some surprises in it, that would work. I was just looking at because we on the new episode of the Poetry Space, we were talking to Chris Anderson. That's Katie Dozier's podcast that I'm the co-host of. We just released, and Dick Westheimer is there. Brian O'Sullivan is there. Joe Barca, Nate Jacob are all part of the squad. That's sort of a roundtable discussion where we bring in people, talk about poetry topics. This week we were talking about spirituality in poetry. We talked to Chris Anderson, who is a Catholic deacon, one of the nicest, and you don't want to swear in front of him. And he comes out and just mentions this Philip Larkin poem, the first line. And so we kind of, the informality made us burst out laughing a little bit. But this be the verse. And notice how the regular meter and the rhyme scheme works here. You could have a poem like this if you're going to be this tight with it. So they fuck you up, your mom and dad. They may not mean to, but they do. They fill you with the faults they had and add some extra just for you. But they were fucked up in their turn by fools in old-style hats and coats who half the time were soppy stern and half at one another's throats. Man hands on misery to man. It deepens like a coastal shelf. Get out as early as you can and don't have any kids yourself. And see how the rhymes, none of the rhymes are the first thing you'd think of. Turn, stern, coats, throats. There's a distance and there's an equidistance to it. It's very well plated. It's situated. It's iambic tetrameter. And there's a sort of a poem like that could be pulled out of this poem here. If you want it to be, go back. If you want it to be, where'd it go? But if you wanted to be that concise and that dense with your poetry, there we go. you could have a poem focusing on those certain runs and have the poem work as long as you built it in and actually thought about the beat and the pace of it and the expectation that sets up that you're playing with. And rather than letting the poem guide you. And I hope that makes sense. Let's see. But that means that everything he goes, he looks smart. Everywhere he goes, he looks smart, presentable, and everyone knows here's a wealthy stand-up guy with a firm handshake and a sensible tie. I sound bitter, and perhaps I am. By chance, I wasn't born a man. Not that it's something I really want to be, but I would, I think, like to be that free. And there's something, it's a little, it works in a way because there's a nice rhythm to it, a nice message to it, but the message is kind of trite at this point in the world. There's that Taylor Swift song, and once Taylor Swift writes a song about it, I don't know if we need to add, it's adding something to our way of understanding the world by saying that again, So there's a little bit of a cliched triteness to coming at that, and you really want to come, find something deeper inside and not something that you could paraphrase. And this is the ending is something that could easily be paraphrased, I guess is the best way to think about that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, anyway, I think that's going to wrap up the show. Thanks, everybody. I hope this was helpful to anybody who participates and shared work in your poems. Our goal is to be as helpful as we can to make everybody better poets so we can hear your stories more clearly, because that's what we want to do. We want to be able to hear and appreciate on that like deeper emotional, the level of our soul, what your experience of this life is like. And so thanks for participating and hope this was helpful. Let's see. So we're coming up. We already mentioned that the Poetry Space just released on spiritual poetry. A lot of great poems read there. Chris Anderson, like we said, is a Catholic deacon, but we didn't focus on, any one religion at all. We were talking about poetry itself as a spiritual practice and how poems are like prayers. It was a really fascinating discussion. Part 1 just came out, so find that. Now, this week's guest on the Rattlecast is, and also, I guess, the spirituality, it was on the heels of that wonderful conversation I had last Sunday with Li Young Lee. So if you haven't seen that yet, go back and watch Li Young Lee's episode. It was one of my favorite, and we've done 292 episodes now. And, to have your favorite really means something at this point. And that was a really great episode. So go back and watch that if you haven't yet. Check out the Poetry Space this weekend. And this week's guest in the Rattlecast is going to be, oops, that's the wrong one, is going to be Susan Cohen. And now Susan is a longtime journalist. Wrote for the Washington Post magazine, taught at a journalism school. So this idea of having the elements of journalism contained within poems that we talk about a lot here is something that's probably going to come up. Her book, Democracy of Fire, is out not too long ago. She has a poem in the spring issue of Rattle, and she's going to be the guest on Rattlecast number 239. The prompt this week was to write a poem with self-portrait in the title that features an odd bird. So see where you can go with that. That's your prompt for the prompt lines in the second hour. But the first hour will be dedicated to Susan Cohen and her work. So join us Sunday, May 18th, the regular time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Hope to see you there. Hope you have a great weekend in the meantime, and we'll talk to you later. Goodbye.